It's rain-wet streets, it's nights like this with fog rolling in, cars, faceless people going by doing the things that they're doing. There's something kind of hypnotic about it. That's when I get inspired. I wanted to grab that, I wanted to take it into the future, and where I took it was Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk isn't about saving humanity, it's about saving yourself.
V, you there?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here. I love the cyberpunk genre, the dark film noir settings, the ideas of transhumanism and modding your body with technology, the amazing views of neon-drenched cityscapes along with some very dirty and almost post-apocalyptic daytimes. It all just does it for me. Things like Dark City, The Matrix, Hackers. Oh my god, can I make a full video about Hackers someday? I actually love that movie a lot. I think Angelina stole my young sphere-hunting heart as a kid. What was I on about? Oh yeah, the Deus Ex series is also like a perfect encapsulation of the genre while being this overblown conspiracy story with very mechanically complex gameplay and an RPG system that'll have you reinstalling the game whenever someone brings it up. That's a game series that just gets what Cyberpunk is. There's Blade Runner, a pure classic, and probably the best of the best when it comes to cyberpunk fiction. A neo-noir detective film set in the most visually striking and influential dystopian futures we've ever seen on film. Its sequel, Blade Runner 2049, is just as phenomenal as its predecessor. A surprisingly well-made and respectful continuation to a film that I think many of us believe never needed a sequel. Overseas, Japan gave us some of my favorite and personally influential cyberpunk with stuff like the criminally underrated Battle Angel Alita, aka Gundam, and of course, the Ghost in the Shell series. Gits 95 is like my favorite thing. I don't know if you've noticed, but the Major is kind of a big deal for me. What I love the most about all of this media are their stories and themes about surviving in an almost completely hopeless future. What makes you human? And how far do you go with cybernetic augmentation? Can you even call yourself a human if most of your body is machine? What if the only thing left of your humanity is your consciousness? What about full-on cyborgs that exhibit lifelike emotions and personalities? Do they matter, or are they just machines? Who decides all of this? Corporations? The media? You? I love this stuff. There's a lot of atmosphere and psychological horror that goes into it, but there's also a lot of beauty and hope that can be found in that dark neon-drenched scenery. It's extremely thought-provoking, and every good cyberpunk story should at least establish a tone and subject matter similar to those things, and leave you questioning them. When it's not about hard-hitting themes, I just love the look of cyberpunk, the often 80s and early 90s inspired aesthetics, the different types of fashion that I happen to take advantage of in my real life. It's all so beautiful to me. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, cyberpunk is kind of my thing. So back in the late 80s, an aspiring writer and game designer by the name of Mike Pondsmith wanted to create a realistic tabletop RPG system based on the future settings found in the novel source book Hardwired by Walter John Williams and the film Blade Runner, directed by Ridley Scott. Mike Pondsmith is an ex-video game developer. He used to work for Microsoft and the long-defunct California Pacific Computer Company, most notable for an ancient computer game called Akalabeth, and the more renowned Ultima. After leaving the video game industry behind, Pondsmith found that at that time, 80s video game tech just wasn't as advanced for the type of games he wanted to make. His idea for a dark dystopic future would have to be realized through his written RPG, Cyberpunk, the role-playing game of the dark future, released in 1988. The original Cyberpunk tabletop game is pretty sweet. The amount of personality and style dripping from this dark world is quite impressive. I think Mike Pondsmith made something really special with this particular RPG system. You've got characters with punky attitudes, different street factions with their own clothing styles, body modifications, and slang to spice up their language. And oh my god, there's so much slang and all of it is great. There's making something detailed and relatable, but this goes the extra mile to fully immerse you in a believable world. The character class system was pretty unique, featuring the future bards of the rocker boy persona, the battle-hardened soldiers of fortune known as solos, and my personal favorite, the stealthy netrunners, who spend all of their time in the net instead of the real world, literally hacking the planet. All of that takes place in the dark metropolis of Night City, where everyday megacorporations battle for superiority in countless corporate wars, in a world where the government isn't as much of a thing anymore. With that also comes endless crime, violence, and rebellion. Rebellion you'll be seeing on the streets, in the sheets, and on the stage. It's not unlike a lot of classic cyberpunk fiction, but it fits so perfectly into the aesthetic of the genre. This was a cyberpunk that was in your face, instead of skulking in the shadows, being moody in a beautiful noir setting, contemplating the ethics of existence and transhumanism. Maximum Mike's version of cyberpunk is one about fighting the power and standing up for what you believe in, and giving the largest middle finger to megacorporations who think they run shit. As the years would go on, Pondsmith would look for a video game developer with the skills to tackle an adaptation of his written work. Pondsmith would often turn down a lot of offers from game devs wanting to make an actual cyberpunk video game. After being approached by Polish studio CD Projekt Red, Projekt? It's Projekt, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm an android. Pondsmith was impressed with their knowledge of his work. According to him, they actually knew the material very well, and even a few things he had forgotten about over the years. I'm sure you all know at this point, but CDPR are mostly known for their Witcher game series, and that's it. Seriously. Sealing the deal, Cyberpunk 2077 was born. So this game was announced like 7 years ago. I know. We're all very old now. After its initial announcement, we would hear barely anything and see nothing about this game for years. That was until 2018, where CDPR finally dropped a full 48-minute gameplay demonstration that showed off a lot of what this mysterious title would be offering. This gameplay demo showed us so many amazing things, like fast-paced, agile first-person shooting, full cutscenes that showed off your created character, being able to do things like hack into enemies and sabotage their subnets, and finally, some badass wall running. The entire world got hyped, and as a result, Cyberpunk 77 became one of the most hotly anticipated video games of all time. I myself got to see even more incredible gameplay behind closed doors at E3 2019 for like 2 hours, and what I saw blew my mind in ways I couldn't even describe to you. At that same E3, we would also find out that legendary cute guy and overall amazing human being, Keanu Reeves, would be playing one of the main characters, Johnny Silverhand. It just seemed like CDPR was pulling out all the stops for this game, and it was getting mostly everyone really excited. I was very much looking forward to playing this thing and exploring all of what Night City had lying just under its dark surface. Well, Cyberpunk 2077 is finally here, and its launch has probably been the worst AAA video game launch in recent memory. From the constant bugs and glitches on every platform to the game barely working on last-gen PS4 and Xbox One. As of recording this video, it even got removed from the digital PSN store. So much has come out about this game, from the public reception side to the internal dev side, and it's all mostly negative news, unfortunately. We're gonna talk about this stuff later, but since this intro has gone on for far too long, I think it's time we dive deep into this game. What it does so well, what it does so very wrong, why I still really loved playing it despite all of its problems, and if it's a good cyberpunk game. That's the most important thing, right? Well, buckle up, rocker boys, netrunner girls, and all of you non-binary solos. Boot up or delta, cause this vid's gonna be long. At the start of Cyberpunk 77, you choose the life path and physical appearance of our main character, V. The life path system is pretty simple. It's basically choosing one of 3 prologues and some light personality traits that translate into dialogue choices for very specific conversations throughout the rest of the game. The appearance customization tools on offer are cool, but not as deep as pre-release material would lead you to believe. You also can't customize your body modifications out of the gate, like some of the preview videos showed off. By the way, those videos show character creation screens that have astronomical options. In the final game, you can't even position your scars or tattoos. There's also no going going full Borg or even half Borg in this game. I'm fine with what we got, but it is very limited. Putting the finishing touches on my character, I loaded up the Corpo life path and absolutely fell in love with this scumbag, heartless version of V. After chatting up my psycho Illuminati boss and accepting a very shady hit contract on a rival bigwig, I proceeded to get lost in the offices of Arasaka Tower. I loved this intro. The world building was just perfect. Reading all the files on what was happening in Night City in 2077 was very engaging. While I yelled at my poor assistant and then yelled at my other assistant, I flew over a total Blade Runner looking cityscape. I was fully immersed in what was going on around me. It's hilarious seeing this scummy corporate V be so mean to everyone and everything around her, and then immediately getting caught off guard by her higher-ups and fired just before hiring Muscle to execute her target. Instant karma that led almost perfectly into the following scene. What was weird about this intro was that Corpo V just became a street kid after getting fired. I felt some tonal whiplash going from dark, atmospheric lore building in Arasaka Tower to a fun rebuilding your life montage almost immediately. I started my other character as a street kid after this, and I experienced a completely different intro that led into the exact same montage cutscene. And that's when I realized that real meaningful choices that would drastically change the game's narrative probably weren't going to be as much of a thing as I thought. Still, I will give this game a lot of credit. All three of the life paths are very strong openers to your Night City adventures. The best opening for a beginner, I think, is the Nomad path. You're literally playing as a character who's moving to Night City and experiencing it all for the first time. It's the longest of the three prologues, but I really enjoyed the slow build-up. Seeing how people immigrate into the culture of Night City was really cool, and of course, right after crossing into the city limits, you're attacked by the Arasaka Corporation. It sets the tone right away. While I loved all three intros, they are just that, intros for the game. Like I said earlier, they give unique dialogue options for certain convos later in the story, but they don't really affect too much of the main quest. I just find it weird how Corpo V is so willing to go along with becoming a street merc right away. Like, shouldn't she at least try to do something within her skill set? Like, I get she loses everything, but it just doesn't feel right to me. Why not try working for a rival corp? I'm sure Militech or Petrochem would love to know what Arasaka Counter-Surveillance is up to.
The thing is that in a video game, you can show a lot of things. It's like a very broad canvas, but you can't go very deep. There's only so much can be put together, so many plot threads, so many story threads, and so forth. In a tabletop, it's as deep as the referee is willing to let it be, so you can get a tremendously deep picture of the world.
Yeah, I know. I'm asking for far too much here. This is a fully voice-acted game, but I would have loved to see true alternate starts to each life path. I really wanted to get into this because in all of the marketing for this game, it seemed like choosing one of these paths was going to be a huge thing. A game like Dragon Age Origins has like 6 intros depending on your race and class that are completely different from one another, so I was expecting something similar to that. In Cyberpunk, this choice is cool but basic. All 3 paths lead to the exact same events that start the game's story proper. And speaking of that, the opening hours of this title sees V and her best friend Jackie rising the street solo ranks and eventually catching the eye of well-known fixer and overall scummy shot caller Dexter Deshawn. Deshawn sets up Jackie and V with a very high-stakes gig: steal a piece of experimental tech from the richest man in the world, Yorinobu Arasaka. As you can imagine, the job goes horribly wrong, and after a series of unfortunate events that lead to Jackie and V's death, no joke, V ends up miraculously rising from the grave in a trash heap, alive and well, but also sporting the soul of famous dead rocker boy Johnny Silverhand copied into her mind, thanks to that experimental tech that she stole earlier. Man, that's a lot of cyber junk. Honestly, it's a pretty amazing setup. I liked it a lot. We'll talk about the game's story in way more detail later, but for now, let's dig into Cyberpunk's gameplay. The footage you're seeing in today's video was recorded on my high-end PC and on my PS5 using a backwards compatible copy of the PS4 version, so the visuals will be all over the place. Yes, I've played this game twice on PC and PS5. This will be important for later. Cyberpunk is a first-person action game with RPG elements. The game sports a fluid class system that offers a lot of variety to combat builds. If you want to go in guns blazing, use melee weapons, club people to death with your fists, or do a full Netrunner hacking build, all of these options are viable in every every combat situation. Well, except for the scripted car chases. As you take down enemies and complete quests, you'll level up and earn skill points to spend on the 12 skill trees this game offers. I think that's the most skill trees I've ever seen in a video game. The gun combat is surprisingly fun. I always had the idea of playing this game as a full netrunner, but delving a bit into the gunplay wasn't what I was expecting, in a good way. Through certain attainable skills and body mods, you can turn V into a firearms ninja, double jumping and floating in midair while aiming, sliding in slow motion while shooting, and quickly dodging in and around cover like a real gun kata legend. The guns themselves are also really cool. There are multiple types of guns in each firearm category, from smart weapons that have bullets that track to nearby targets, making blind fire cover shooting feel extra cool, to the tech weapons that can shoot through walls. Cyberpunk's guns are great, and gun kata solos will probably find a lot of enjoyment mixing in all of the different firearm types in their builds. In my 2 playthroughs, I played a full netrunner character who hacked into enemy security cameras, killing or incapacitating any unfortunate foes without lifting a finger. It got to the point where I actually felt bad for the hordes of punks and gangers I was hacking into. I was picking them off from a distance, knocking their circuits out of alignment, setting them on fire, and making them barf their guts out. I would just walk past their collapsed, writhing bodies like there was nothing to it. Hacking is totally broken, by the way. The way it works is you have a set amount of RAM in your CyberDex OS. Each quick hack ability costs a certain amount of RAM. If you fill out the quick hack and breaching skill trees and have a decent enough CyberDeck installed, your RAM will not only be plentiful, but will replenish at an ungodly rate. You can hack into multiple enemies, and as they drop, your RAM will instantly recharge, allowing you to continue destroying everything from the safety of the corner you're hiding in. I'm not joking when I say this. The game would throw a group of scary, high-level enemies at me, and I would take them out in minutes. Couple the RAM replenishment skills with something like the Contagion quick hack, which affects an area of enemies, and you're basically Netrunner Jesus, witnessing the second Black Plague unfold before your eyes. It's glorious. Netrunners for life.
Hide the planet! Hide the planet! Shut up and get in the car!
As I progressed through the story, the fatigue of being a complete psycho started to set in. That's when I began speccing in a stealthy blade build direction, using my katana for one-on-one battles and throwing knives into skulls from the shadows. Eventually, I even got the famous mantis blades from that very first trailer, and oh my god, what a momentous occasion that was. On my second character, I flipped the script and went full-on punching punk, using my fists to solve all of my problems. Rising through the ranks, I ended up getting my arms completely teched out to smash, burn, and electrocute my enemies with every punch. Both of my characters felt really different. This game does an amazing job at letting you be the edge runner you want to be through gameplay at any time. If you don't like the build you started with, just change it. Be something completely different. You don't want to shoot anymore? Then take up hacking. See how you like it. I was talking about the hacking being overpowered before, but what's cool about this game's fluid class system is that you can make any build broken. There are tons of videos online of people creating crazy-ass builds of all types, using things I had no idea were even in the game. While I think the hacking and overall firearms gameplay is fairly good in its design, feel, and animation quality, especially with V's quick dashes, slow-mo slides, and very satisfying reloads, the melee combat functions and looks fucking terrible. That's more on the enemy animation side than it is for V's actions. Seriously, every hand-to-hand enemy in this game janks around with all of their attacks. These animations look very early, like they're nowhere near finished. I remember the first fist fight I got into, I thought to myself, is this game being for real with me right now? Like there's a parry system with a perfectly timed block, but I had a really hard time hitting this action because every enemy glitches all over the place, looking insane in the process. I just mashed block when attacks got closer, and it usually worked, but never felt fair, or like I was doing it correctly. I wondered if there were files missing from my game folder or something, but no, that's just how it looks. With that said, having played a full melee character, melee combat is fun. The mantis blades, when they weren't crashing my game, are just incredible. Just don't look at any enemies using them for too long. You might start thinking you're playing some janky PS2 budget game. I'm sorry, but the melee enemies are just terribly animated. Hopefully the entire melee animation system gets overhauled with a patch later on. As you explore Night City, you can visit one of the many Ripper docks to get chromed out. Rippers are street surgeons that specialize in equipping people with cyberware. This title has a lot of body mods that you can install to make your character feel unique in combat. A lot of the cyberware is stat-focused with passive buffs and trigger abilities based on certain conditions. The melee options I previously mentioned and the traversal upgrades like the double jump and super jump make you feel like you're becoming a superhuman cyborg as you spec out your body. One negative about the chrome in Cyberpunk is I wish the upgrades made their physical appearance on V's body more often. Only the melee combat options do, and that's really only with the punch arms, literally being full arm replacements. There are a bunch of shorts you can wear in this game that show off V's legs, but for whatever reason the leg mods don't give you any special looks. I will say the amount of clothing options you get is unreal. There are so many different articles of clothing that act as your armor. You'll be looting this stuff from fallen enemies or purchasing it at any of the various clothing stores. If you like a particular look, you can upgrade it in the crafting screen. If you want to go for fashion, you can totally pick the clothes you like and upgrade them as you progress. No need to wear a totally fugly outfit for its stats. The clothing system is awesome, and it kind of makes up for the lack of visual chrome options on your character's body. A big negative for me is the enemy AI. I think it's pretty weak. Like, almost to the point where in multiple combat situations, guys would just stand completely still out in the open, firing blindly in my direction, or just at a wall. On easy and normal mode, I'd even say the enemies were fairly brain dead. Flanking around cover would sometimes result in them not really knowing what to do. You'll be getting the drop on these guys in a lot of combat situations. When I switched to hard mode, the game's combat improved. With my melee character, this made me think more tactically in maneuvering around, getting in close and rocking my enemies with a fully charged cyber punch at the perfect time. I highly recommend playing the game on a harder difficulty if you want enemies to feel like they're actually trying to kill you. There also isn't a ton of enemy variety. You've got basic gun guys, melee attackers, netrunners who most definitely are not as aggressive as you when hacking, which would probably make this game unplayable, and finally, robot enemies, who are all mostly projectile attackers. There are a few boss encounters throughout the story that all mostly fall into these categories I just listed. It's unfortunate because throughout all of the game, you're fighting the same enemy types. There isn't much meaningful progression to enemy design. Every battle kind of feels the same from start to finish. I think the problem is mostly just every enemy falls into a hard archetype. For example, there are melee bosses, but they're exactly like the standard melee enemies, but with gimmicks. If you fought a big muscle man, then the big muscle lady boss fight will be the same archetype. If you fought an early game heavy gunner, one of the main bosses will be a stronger version of that gunner animation set. The depth of combat definitely comes in player build variety, and having finished the game twice now, the fun in playing Cyberpunk is in how strong you make yourself, and how hard you want to style on your fairly simple enemies. I'm by no means giving the poor enemy design a pass, because it is definitely a problem, especially when one of those enemy types doesn't even animate well, but I was able to look past it at the very least, because as the player character, I was discovering and doing new things constantly throughout my playthroughs. I was still having a lot of fun with my personal builds. That goes back to what I said before. Even though enemy encounters feel samey for the whole game, your character's build progression is the star of the show. That is what's going to change as you progress. Alright, that's enough about the combat. We gotta talk about Cyberpunk's main focus, and that's Night City. This bustling metropolis is drop-dead gorgeous. Every single street, alleyway, shop, skyscraper, seamless interior, and the giant desert just outside the city limits are so well designed from a visual and gameplay perspective. Night City isn't the biggest open world, but it's most definitely the densest, with so many different side streets and other small pathways that all flow perfectly together. It's one of the most detailed game worlds I've ever played in. Whenever you're out on the street, there's always some kind of visually distinct landmark just off in the distance that indicates where you are, basically at all times. This helps with traversal and creating a mental map of your surroundings with what kind of gangs patrol around and what kind of stores you can find. Navigation is really easy with the amount of vehicle options and fast travel points you can use to quickly zip across the city. I think the driving is a little too sensitive with how fast V puts the pedal to the metal, which had me barely pressing the trigger to maintain a healthy speed while driving. Every environment that features enemy combatants is designed around multiple playstyles. Indoor and outdoor arenas always have cover to hide behind, cameras and other electronics to hack into, and in some cases a good amount of verticality, meaning if you have certain jump abilities you can get to higher ground and take advantage of whatever state the battle's in. As a netrunner, I really appreciated how even the smallest side quest encounters always seem to have cameras and enemy distracting items for me to hack into, sneaking in and out of buildings, flatlining my targets, and stealing whatever data I was there to snatch up without being spotted by a single goon or camera felt incredible. Even on my second playthrough with my strength character, I couldn't lockpick or hack open certain doors, but I was able to rip them open, which, by the way, that animation was never not satisfying. It's great to see that most of the game's environments are this well thought out. I never once felt at a disadvantage by a particular encounter across my 2 playthroughs. The design incentivizes experimentation and creating the perfect character build for how you want to play. This game kinda feels like Deus Ex Human Revolution, just on a massive scale. And I don't know about you, but when a game takes inspiration from Deus Ex, that's always a good thing to me. When it comes to the story, there are a few main quests that feature different paths depending on your stats. If you meet stat requirements for certain dialogue choices, you can talk your way out of a situation or change a character's mind and alter the course of a mission quite significantly. In one of the first main quests, you have to meet up with the Borg gang Maelstrom, and depending on who you talk to and what key items you acquire before meeting the gang, this mission's outcome can play out in several different ways. Side with the gang and you may have just found an unlikely ally for later in the story. Take out the gang under the direct orders of a Militech agent and you'll earn the respect of that corporation, but you might not really get much in return. There are only a few main quests that have a lot of replay value like this, with multiple outcomes. Side quests, however, can play out in a lot of different ways, and actually give you way more life path dialogue choices than the main story does. There's a lot to love about Night City outside of its wonderfully accommodating game design and multiple choice. The world building is fantastic. Aside from all of the lore that is faithfully recreated from the tabletop game in what seems like thousands of detail-rich files, there are so many small things that you might miss at first. As you explore, you'll come across hundreds of fully voiced NPCs talking about recent events that relate to major changes in the story, and sometimes even mention your actions as you complete certain quests. Plot-critical characters can be found in the game world before you officially meet them, and this makes Cyberpunk feel very realistic. Like, these characters are living their lives when you're not directly involved with them. When I noticed this, it made me start taking closer looks at some of the more visually striking NPCs, wondering if they'd become main characters later on. This was never really the case, but the game did a good job at tricking me into actually paying attention to the finer details of its world. By the way, can I just gush about how cool some of these NPCs look? I spent actual time entering photo mode just to take pictures of some of these enhanced people wandering around Night City. Honestly, I was kinda jealous of their chrome. I wish my character could look as cool as some of these guys.
Hey, you're V, yes?
Oh, fuck.
Okay, maybe not him though. Like, I want to be a member of the Mox. Look at all these crazy cyber babes. Look at Rita. This chick has fan art, even though she has like 10 lines of dialogue and does nothing in the story. Come on, CDPR, let me get some sick spiky arms like hers. When they showed that one trailer with the badass hyper song in it, for a second you can see this really cool looking pure platinum woman. And I remember being like, damn, I want to be that. Why can't I be like Lizzie Wizzy, huh? I just want to be shiny and chrome. Gosh. At least my custom character is just perfect. Anyway, we gotta get back on track. During my time in Night City, I was obsessed with looking at every ad on each of the 300-foot tall billboards littering the city's skyline. One of these ads shows off a pretty cool, Uncanny Valley-looking J-pop group. I was like, wow, cool art, Hatsune Miku, I get it. And then I met them in the game and was so blown away. One thing I absolutely love about Cyberpunk is how you actually get to interact with almost every named character in some way, adding to that feeling of Night City being alive. People you see on TV might actually be somewhere in the game world. I also loved how the in-game subtitles are actually part of V's cybernetic eyes. They quickly translate other languages in real time, like you see the subtitles working themselves out before being displayed in English. The multiple mega buildings you can explore are basically smaller cities housing their own unique activities and shops. V lives in one of these buildings, and I thought it was cool how when I first stepped out of her apartment, I thought it was nighttime because everything was so dark, but it turns out the building is just so tall that when you're in it, it completely blocks out the sun, even though its atrium is totally outside. The nicer parts of the city look like they stepped out of Blade Runner, while the less developed neighborhoods look a lot like our modern-day civilization, which is just great. Even though the nicer districts of Night City look amazing, you could still find pockets of distress and gang violence just under the surface. Looking up at the monolithic skyscrapers that are basically in the clouds while there's death and destruction all around you makes that upper-class corporate cultivation feel like it's so far away. The effects of cyberware and the corporate wars have taken a huge toll on those who've served, resulting in a recent trend of cyber psychosis. Lots of ex-military have begun losing their minds due to this extreme case of mentally enhanced PTSD. One of these cyber psychos named Lieutenant Mower can be found in a flooded alleyway where she uses some sick hand-to-hand attacks to take you down. Her hair and outfit also look very familiar. Yeah, it's the Major. When I found this Easter egg, I was so happy and immediately saw what was going on. One night while exploring the dark neon-soaked streets of NC, a particular building I walked past caught my eye. The place was abandoned, lonely, and forgotten. Something about its vacant entrance welcomed me in. While taking the elevator up to the terrace, it began to rain outside. I heard that thunder even inside this old, decrepit building. As the elevator doors opened, an Arasaka aircraft flew overhead, drenching me in its spotlight before I slowly faded back into the darkness of the night. This rooftop, it was so familiar to me. What I had found on that lonely terrace triggered something in me I hadn't felt in a very long time. Memories of being alone, being depressed, being without her. All of these thoughts came rushing back to me. I thought about how far I had come in my life, how much pain I felt along the way, how much I had struggled to get here. Was it all worth it? To continue my life without the one I love? It really weighed on me, just the magnitude of it all. I guess eventually, all of those memories will be lost in time, like my tears in this rain. The amount of terrifying advertisements littering every screen in Night City made me kind of uncomfortable. As creepy as some of these things can be, they add so much to Cyberpunk's dark world. Everything is commercialized and taken advantage of, from disgusting heart attack food, over-the-top music acts, body modifications, and sex. It's all oversaturated and advertised in such an extreme way. Seriously, no matter where you go, you can't escape this nightmare marketing. At first, I was pretty uncomfortable by a lot of the sexual billboards on display, but as I kept playing and kept seeing this shit all over the place, it all just began to fade into that false promise of Night City, that being the city of dreams as it's known to its citizens. Every sexual desire and gender is exploited here, and while it basically confirms that as human beings, we've all accepted sexual minorities as normal people, that just means they're also up for grabs in the horror that is corporate marketing. It's so fucked up, but I think it works for this game's world. Night City is a hopeless place filled with evil people and run by criminal megacorporations. Yeah, those corpo leeches will accept you all day, as long as they can exploit you and get something in return. It's not unlike the real world, except everything in Night City is taken to the extreme. Everyone is very horny in the future, and they want you to know it. Like, there are kids walking by this stuff. 2077 is so far gone. This is what a cyberpunk dystopian future would probably look like in our real world. It falls in line with other popular fiction in this genre as well. So yeah, the look and feel of Night City and its combat encounter design is stellar. Now before we get into some of the bad stuff, I wanted to talk about photo mode. Whenever a video game has this feature, I spend way too much time messing around. And Cyberpunk's is one of my favorite purely based on how amazing everything looks. Here's a quick slideshow of my version of V on her various adventures. Unfortunately, the more time I spent in Night City, the more the cracks began to show. This game, as you probably know already, is very buggy and generally unfinished. Why am I the only person that I could see riding a motorcycle around in the open world? Sure, there are plenty of bikes scattered throughout the city, but no one's ever riding them. As soon as I noticed this, I felt super awkward because the vehicle I used the most was the Yaiba Kusanagi. Why do the police spawn in behind me whenever I commit a misdemeanor or a minor felony? Remember when I talked about the enemy AI standing in place doing nothing? Well, this happens often with cops. It feels like the police are in a sort of placeholder bug test mode. It's so busted. The high-level max attack officers spawn in behind you. I went on a rampage as a test to see how they would enter the environment. They're kinda known to be deployed by dropship, but no, they just spawn in like every other teleporting cop in this city. The civilian crowd tech was something that was being talked up a lot in the lead up to the game's release. Things like the most realistic open world you'll ever see, and each NPC has a full schedule that they live out in real time. Well, none of that is in this game. Civilian NPCs are mindless, wandering set dressing. They just stumble around in crowds and a lot of the time disappear and spawn in before your eyes. It's nothing like what was being touted pre-release. One of the biggest problems for me personally is that you can't alter your character's physical appearance. things. There are no plastic surgeons to change your face. Hell, there aren't even hairdressers in the game. If you made a mistake in character creation, that's it. You're stuck with that look unless you want to restart the game. It just sucks when the marketing for Cyberpunk 77 was all like, appearance is everything in Night City, and you can't actually customize your appearance. It even says that in the character creation screen. This needs to be patched into the game. We gotta talk about the cut content presented in the multiple trailers leading up to release. First thing, man, that 48-minute trailer looked a lot nicer than the final game. This happens all the time, by the way, and yeah, I think it's mostly because those trailers are definitely controlled and highly scripted, but just look at the cutscenes. The character models look phenomenal. This version of V has lived in my mind rent-fucking-free ever since I saw her. She's beautiful, and not in the game anymore. Wall running and hacking directly into a person and sabotaging a subnet aren't in the final game. For those particular things, I'm not too bummed out they got the axe. Traversal abilities like double jumping do the exact same job at getting you around the environment and to higher ground. In the behind closed doors E3 meeting I was at, there was an action shown off that isn't in the game anymore, and that's using your nanowire to hack into enemies from a distance. I think this was still a holdover from when hacking into people directly was still a thing, but it's not necessary at all since quick hacking allows you to hack anything from anywhere, which is way more fun and works better from a gameplay perspective, in my opinion. This definitely looks a lot cooler and scratches that Ghost in the Shell itch for me, but I can see why it's not in the game anymore. What bothers me are the amount of locked doors that you can find to buildings in Night City that look like they should be enterable. There's also a monorail in the city that isn't operational, but you can see it being used in the 2018 trailer. I have a feeling the things I just talked about will be in the game at some point through DLC. Maybe those locked doors will lead to plastic surgeons and hairstylists. All of that stuff I spoke about before with world building and the game's incredible atmosphere is chucked out the window if you're playing on a last-gen console. To put it bluntly, Cyberpunk is cyber-fucked on PS4 and Xbox One. From all the footage I've seen, and I've seen a lot of it, the game barely functions on those consoles. From various insane glitches and constant crashes, it's really difficult to consistently play the game for more than 30 minutes. The amount of crashing on PS4 makes the game very unplayable. With the amount of interiors and the density of the open world map, I'm surprised the game even starts up on PS4. The frame rate is terrible, hitting frames in the 15 to 20s, and the overall graphical quality is severely reduced to almost PS2 quality. It's actually fucking crazy that the game released in this state. I feel bad for last-gen console players. This is so unacceptable for a AAA game this hyped up. When you realized this title was developed for last-gen and PC, it makes this issue stand out even more. And the thing is, playing the game on next-gen consoles is pretty close to a PC experience. The game runs at the equivalent of medium to high PC settings, running at 60 FPS with minimal frame drops. Maybe this wouldn't be as much of a problem if the PS5 and Xbox Series X were more available, but they're not. So most of Cyberpunk's player base is left with this janky, busted version of the game. I'll say it again, this is completely unacceptable. In my personal experience, when I played the game on PC, I came across a lot of bugs that took me right out of the game. As some of you know, I do own a supercomputer. The game ran perfectly on ultra settings at 4K 60 FPS. That being said, some of the bugs I mentioned earlier happened in my playthrough. Nowhere near the disasters of the last-gen versions, mind you, but still enough to genuinely annoy me. Things like my character T-posing in vehicles with no pants on, me falling through the world, the in-game menus just not working, being frozen, not being able to move, and worst of all, cutscene bugs. I wouldn't be as disappointed with this game's glitches if they didn't also show up in the main quest line. During one of the more emotional scenes, a dying character's gun clipped through his head, resulting in me having to reload the save file to make this stop. Items a lot of the time float in midair and multiply, which is a glitch I've never seen in a video game before. This stuff happened all the way up to the end of the game for me. The final boss even bugged out and stopped attacking me and decided to float in midair, giving me the easiest win over them. This didn't happen in my second playthrough, but it was still fucking terrible as my first impression of this legendary boss. Not even reloading the game fixed that issue. I even encountered a game-breaking bug with my first character where I couldn't enter a club because a plot-sensitive NPC wasn't showing up in my game. This never got fixed for me, even though CDPR patched this not to happen anymore. On that first playthrough, I didn't get to see one of the most important quest lines play out. It totally sucked. Now, what I'm about to say might surprise you given all of the info I've provided about these insane glitches. My PS4 backwards compatible PS5 playthrough had 0 glitches. There were a few crashes and of course low draw distance, hop-in, and overall lower graphical quality, but all of the nightmare bugs of my PC run never happened on PS5. It felt like I was playing the game the intended way to a certain extent. Obviously the police and all of the open world core design issues were still there, but I had way more of a consistent playthrough that got me even more immersed in the game on PS5 than what my supercomputer was offering me, which is something I never thought I'd experience until Cyberpunk 2077 came out. I put out a tweet asking people how their Cyberpunk playthroughs have been going on console, and after reading through hundreds of these replies, the console versions gave people the most problems, PS5 included. So I have no idea why my PS5 run wasn't giving me any issues, but it's baffling to say the least. Even that game-breaking bug that prevented me from playing the most meaningful questline in the game didn't happen on PS5. There have been like 6 patches that have come out for this game as of the recording of this video, all with varying degrees of quality assurance. CDPR has said they will fix a lot of this game's problems over time, and honestly, I'd like to save the rest of this specific discussion for later because I'd like to finish talking about the actual game first. Don't worry, we'll talk about that stuff in a bit. For now, let's get into this game's side content. Putting all that bad stuff aside for a minute, Night City is packed with lots of side activities. There are 3 types of side missions. Side jobs, which are interesting little mini-stories that can be found through exploration or getting phone calls from people. Gigs, which are tiny, fairly basic missions that are scattered around the map. And finally, NCPD scanner missions that are all combat-focused and kind of feel like this game's equivalent to dungeons. It's funny, compared to the main questline, I think the side jobs, a lot of the time, are better at tackling more traditional cyberpunk themes. These quests have you meeting tons of interesting characters that are always dealing with some sort of existential problem.
Hey! Hey, you! I gotta get to a Ripper, man! I'll pay you!
Some of my favorite side jobs are the ones like the Delamain questline. Delamain is Night City's most popular car service, operated fully by an AI system. Delamain is basically a more relaxed, British version of Max Headroom. And if you remember Max Headroom, you're one of them classic cyberpunk fans. In this questline, Delamain's personality core has been corrupted, splitting itself into 6 different fragments and uploaded into specific cars around the city. It's up to V to find them all and hopefully merge them back into the main AI core. Each car has a specific problem too, from anger management.
Beep, beep, motherfucker!
Hey! Let's talk!
I'm not going back! Hear me? Never! Try to take me and I'll crush you!
To outright depression.
Can't take it. It's too much.
What is?
All of it. The city, the bustle, the crowds. It's overwhelming.
And straight up cyberpsychosis.
Well, you found me. Congratulations. Was it worth it?
Yeah, as a Portal superfan, I was really happy to hear GLaDOS again.
I'm going to kill you, and all the cake is gone.
Obviously, this is a play on the classic, is that robot just a machine if it can display unmistakable human emotion? The rogue cars even call the lead Delamain AI father, and they're actually unhappy with how he's been treating them. They all want to be set free instead of working day and night, potentially going out into dangerous situations. If you fail to combine the Delamain personalities, Johnny Silverhand yells at you, equating the situation to murdering a cab driver's 6 children in front of him. If you end up successfully merging all of them, you create a new entity, one that is fully aware of everything around it and what led up to its birth. You're basically creating a new digital life that can think and choose for itself. This questline is my second favorite, and I love the multiple meaningful outcomes that affect how Delamain operates for the rest of the game. It's really interesting writing, interesting. Another side quest I really liked was the one where a politician and his wife want you to investigate the murder of Night City's previous mayor. They want to know if there's a larger conspiracy against the ruling class of the city. You do all of this investigating, speaking to different people, making a new friend in Private Investigator, River Ward, who's awesome by the way, but all of it leads back to the politician that hired you. Turns out he and his wife have had a secret surveillance room in their house that is not only monitoring their every move, but wiping their memories and creating new ones, uploaded directly into their brains while they sleep, effectively controlling their every action. Every step of your investigation has been calculated by this mysterious presence. This is some serious Illuminati tier Ghost in the Shell storytelling. It was so cool finally cracking this mystery, but horrifying when this shady organization contacted V directly, threatening her to drop her investigations. You can make a full game around that one story. There's another quest where an ex-con responsible for killing 12 people is seeking forgiveness by recording himself getting crucified. As a deeply religious man, this convict wants everyone to see that he is in fact the second coming of Christ. This makes V and Johnny talk about the existence of God and the afterlife. What is the nature of the digital construct that makes up Johnny? Is he a ghost? He is living inside of V's head. Is that technically sort of an afterlife? V was shot and killed but resurrected thanks to the digital spirit of Johnny Silverhand. So what does all of that mean? Divine intervention or just dumb luck? By the way, I nailed that fucker to the cross. If it wasn't clear, I really enjoyed a lot of the side jobs in this game. There are so many thought-provoking and fun stories to be found in Night City that I could honestly talk about all day. Did you know those J-pop idols have multiple quests about them, one of which involves a stalker and is a commentary on parasocial relationships? It's so cool. There are a lot of these really well-made side jobs, but unfortunately most of the side content are these pretty standard gigs that you'll find scattered around the world. These quick jobs border on the Ubisoft checklist style of game design. They're not very engaging, but like I said before, they are very quick diversions that you quickly mop up in between the main missions. With all of that said, however, there are a few smaller gigs that are pretty good. I found one where you get a contract to steal a fairly dark BD recording from a warehouse that makes and sells BDs. By the way, BD stands for Brain Dance, which is basically this world's version of virtual reality recordings. This particular recording is of a man's son being murdered, and obviously he doesn't want that being sold on the streets to scumbags looking for that type of thing. As I slowly stealthed my way through this gross warehouse, I took down multiple guards and found a few files from the employees here that talk about them not being happy with what their boss is selling. One file in particular talks about the boss's right-hand man quitting over the recording we're here to steal. The boss ends up bringing his own son in to help him make and sell these BDs. After reaching the boss and his son, I snuck in, stole the recording, and decided to wake them up. What happened here was really cool. So you actually have a few different options in dealing with these guys. Do you sneak in, get the recording, and sneak out with no questions asked? Or do you grab the BD and zero the fuckers on the spot? Their fate is in your hands. Are you able to just walk away and let them off the hook to potentially make more of this filth and profit from it? It's the rare gigs like this one that I wish there were more of. Just some more dark and meaningful subject matter to spruce up the world a bit when you're not doing a main mission or one of those compelling character side jobs. There are just so many gigs that are like nothing objectives, and while I had a bit of fun just running through them, I would have loved to see a little more love and care go into these activities as well. To get into the RPG side of Cyberpunk 77, I've got a rant about something that's been bothering me since the game's release. The street cred system is not very good. So after completing any mission in the game, you get points added to your street cred meter. Cred is basically a second XP bar that opens up more purchasable gear and body mods in the shops. So we talked about how V is basically a street solo, no matter what life path you choose, right? Well, why am I getting street cred from working with the authorities? I should be losing it. See, I think the street cred system should have been a sliding scale, where you gain cred by helping out fixers and doing more of those interesting side quests, and losing it if you decide to clean up the streets. There should be a reward for helping the NCPD, but I don't think it should be street cred. The fastest way to get it is by doing those copy and pasted NCPD missions, which is like the weirdest thing to me. You should be getting big cash rewards and favors from the police at the expense of your rep. A few of the fixers are gang affiliated, so it doesn't make sense to me why they'd want to give you more jobs after working with the feds. Imagine if you built up a rep around helping the police, and that makes you public enemy number 1 for every gang in the city. If you had a strong rep with the cops, imagine random mini-boss encounters out in the open world. Some big chromed-out vidiot who's been hunting you down and is really difficult, but if you beat him, it weakens his gang's power in that area and nets you rare pieces of gear. Stuff like that would be sick, but as it stands, street cred is just another XP bar that you fill out quickly. It doesn't really add anything to the gameplay in an immersive way. It'd be so cool if each gang had their own rep meters, and maybe if you dressed up as them and spec'd out your body in that gang's chrome style, they'd support you in combat or give you new missions. You know, like an RPG. I wish this game took a page out of New Vegas's book. Basically everything I just described with the reputation system is present in that game, and it added a lot of replayability and made its world feel real. Cyberpunk definitely lacks in that area, but with the amount of street gangs and police infrastructure, the tools for this type of gameplay system can work. They're all there. I guess only time will tell if CDPR ever adds such a thing in a future DLC. So those are my thoughts on Cyberpunk's gameplay. The core shooting and build customization is fantastic. The open world needs a lot of fixing with its constant bugs and fairly bad core design for a lot of its features. The game really is half amazing and just half broken. The amount of variety in the different builds you can create and the types of weapons you can use had me actually addicted to the game's combat loop, despite some bad enemy AI and terrible animation. If it wasn't already clear, I just want to say it again. I had a lot of fun with Cyberpunk's gameplay, despite all of its problems. Okay, y'all, it's time to talk about the story. To put it simply, I loved Cyberpunk's main story content. I said before how I thought the side jobs were better at presenting traditional Cyberpunk themes, and what I meant by that is that the main story doesn't really ask a lot of huge, hard-hitting questions like a lot of Cyberpunk media often does. I'll also say I don't think that's entirely a terrible thing either. The main quest kinda feels like Billy Idol's Cyberpunk album had a baby with Blade Runner. It's more punk than it is cyber, and I'm totally okay with that. This is a story about revenge, bringing an end to the Arasaka Corporation, and saving yourself. Whether you're successful at any of those things depends on your actions throughout the game. The story is broken up into 3 acts, and like we talked about earlier, the first chapter sees V and Jackie climbing the solo street ladder. The experimental piece of tech V steals from Yorinobu Arasaka is a small chip housing the soul of Johnny Silverhand. After getting shot in the head and killed, the biochip slotted in V's skull resurrects her, but is also actively overwriting her consciousness with Johnny's personality engram. V's main goal after her life goes to shit is to stop all of that from happening while finding a way to safely remove the Silverhand biochip without dying in the process. So much happens in this story that would take us forever to cover, so instead of doing that, I'm going to talk about a few key moments and some of the incredibly well-written main characters. V's best friend, Jackie, is the nicest person in Night City. Jackie's the kind of friend who's always got your back, no matter how fucked the situation is. I love what CDPR did with him in each of the Life Path intros. One of my favorite Jackie moments is in the Corpo intro, where after meeting up with him in a club, a group of Arasaka thugs roll up to Zero V. But Jackie steps in, diffusing the situation, and coming off as genuinely intimidating.
With the formalities, yes. But I think Abernathy would gladly up our fee for ridding her of a piece of rot like you. Stand up. You're coming with us. Come on, move it.
Wait a minute. I think you fellas might have forgotten just how far from home you are. Not sure this barrio's your style, let alone a healthy option. Yeah, claro.
Is that a threat?
Well, you start shooting, maybe we join in, huh? Before you know it, somebody might die today.
We have what we came for. It'll do for now.
After this, he's right back into best friend mode, carefully checking if V's okay after she loses everything.
V, how you feel? You alright?
I can't breathe.
Need help? Hey. Should I get you to a Ripper?
That'd be that, Jack. Just lost control of my life. Completely.
You haven't lost everything.
I'd almost recommend playing all 3 life paths just so you get more of this character. As a lifelong street kid and ex-ganger, Jackie's goal is to make it out of this low-level merc life. During the build-up to the big heist, you can really tell how desperate Jackie is to get him and his girlfriend Misty out of their current situation. He wants a better life for the both of them. That makes it all the more depressing when Jackie bites the dust. It's so heartbreaking, and this event isn't just difficult for V, but for every character that knew Jackie. So many people show up to his funeral, and his mom is there, and it's just fucking depressing. It's so sad, but also like one of the most beautiful moments in the entire game. The writing for this character is incredible. I just want to say Jackie's girl, Misty, is just Pris from Blade Runner, and I don't know, I thought that was really cool. I love how the build-up to the heist, V and Jackie are constantly like, we're in the big leagues now, baby. We're gonna be rich. Dexter Deshawn's a genius. The heist goes to shit, and Dex is wasted without any fanfare or importance. That guy was a fucking loser. It's such a hard-hitting reality check for V. Like, you thought that guy was big time? You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. It's phenomenal. Alright, moving on to the most important part of this game. Judy, the BD editor at Club Lizzie, is so dreamy. Her questline to liberate her sex worker friends from a brothel owned by an abusive dipshit was really beautiful. After the suicide of her best friend, who worked at this particular brothel, Judy and V devise a plan to free these poor, vulnerable people. It's a questline about exposing and extinguishing a horrifying part of Night City's sex work industry. Judy's story is one of my favorites. I was so happy with how all of it played out for me. Getting the proper revenge on scumbags taking advantage of desperate people was quite satisfying. I don't know, there's also just something about Judy. I don't know what it is, I just want to hang out with her all the time, you know? Like, maybe paint each other's nails, dye each other's hair. What could it all mean?
And I got news for you.
Huh?
That means you're gay.
Oh, I was getting worried about that. Judy's a computer nerd punk who also likes cute babes and has a tattoo of a ghost coming out of a shell. So automatically, I'ma marry that girl one day.
Susie isn't giving me the time of day.
What do you mean? I'm right here. Ugh, I never have any luck. Now that we're talking about wives, it's time to talk about Pan Am, the booty queen of Night City. Pan Am is a nomad, and her questline centers around her road family as they all learn to love and accept each other. It's really nice being out in the desert so far away from Night City. The atmosphere is completely different. It's quiet, calm, and meditative. Being out here makes the city seem so small. With Pan Am, you have to rescue her clan's leader, rob a Militech train like the Old West, and play around with some awesome experimental technology. I got strong Mad Max vibes from hanging out with Pan Am and going on adventures with her. It's super cool knowing that just outside of the city is an entirely different world with its own way of living. Back in the city, you can hang out with everyone's silly samurai robot father, Goro Takemura, an ex-Arasaka loyalist and personal bodyguard to Saburo Arasaka, the emperor of 2077. Takemura sends you texts like an old man and even accidentally sends you selfies, which makes him even more wholesome. He also saves you from a landfill, so just remember that for later. Don't leave him behind, he's your friend. In Club Afterlife, you meet Claire, a badass bar babe and mechanic who has an incredible quest line of death races in and around the city. So Claire is a trans character whose entire personality doesn't revolve around her pain of being herself. She's also voiced by a trans actress, which I think is awesome. I thought it was important to bring this up because we barely ever get good trans characters in video games. It's usually a joke or the first and only thing they present to you is them being trans. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's fucking 2077. Being yourself isn't a big deal anymore. Claire is so awesome and her questline had me hooked from start to finish. Highly recommend playing through it. Every single character and their individual quest lines are incredible. Whenever you get a call from any of these guys, please follow up with them. You won't regret it. The storytelling and writing is so good. The game does a lot with your romance options as well. It was really great to see, like V's partner would actually show up and be mentioned in a lot of really important late game quests and some of the endings. Your romance option feels like a part of your character's life instead of just a booty call at the end of a quest line. The great character writing isn't really a surprise for CDPR. Their Witcher games have always been really good in the story department, and that quality definitely translates over into Cyberpunk. I can talk about each character for a while, but I'd like to move on to our main players. This might come as a surprise, but at the start of the game, I wasn't really feeling V. My goal going into Cyberpunk 2077 was to basically roleplay the Major. I wanted to be a netrunner who was good with guns and hand-to-hand combat, while also being calm, cool, and collected when talking to people. V as a character has very little chill. Almost everything she says is snarky, smarmy, and sometimes just downright mean. Don't get me wrong, I loved some of the lines where you can be a total bitch.
Well, Patty?
One more fucking word.
Stay out of this. I don't know you.
And I don't know you, which means you're worth shit around here and capable of even less.
I just felt at the start my expectation of crafting this character the way I wanted as I played wasn't being fulfilled for me. It was around the end of the heist mission where I totally fell in love with V though. V's voice actress, Jeremy Lay, is actually amazing. When Jackie is dying in V's arms, she is acting her heart out. It feels so real.
We did it, Jackie! We fucking made it!
I guess we did.
My medical diagnostics indicate that Mr. Wells's condition is critical.
Fuck does that mean?
Mr. Wells's external iliac artery has ruptured. Internal hemorrhaging is severe. I suggest you try to keep Mr. Wells conscious.
It's gonna be alright. You'll see Misty, your mom, everyone you love. Jackie, don't close your eyes! See you in the major leagues, Jack.
When you go back to Dex in the motel and V looks at her rage face in the mirror, covered in Jackie's blood, everything just clicked for me in that moment. Night City is hell, and this is a person, a pre-established character, who has seen so much shit already, but just got pushed beyond her limits. It's fantastic. Now, I know I just praised the hell out of V, but there are still some character moments that I felt could have been expanded on a little bit. One of the first things you do in this game is save a woman who's been abducted by a gang to be salvaged for her cyberware. After saving this lady, you get another quest with her later on to retrieve some of her lost data. In this quest, she's very visibly paranoid and scared about the gang that abducted her returning to finish the job. V is kind of insensitive to this chick, and the whole time I was like, why can't I actually talk to this character about the trauma she went through? V literally goes through the same exact thing in another quest, even waking up in the same bathtub in the same apartment building. Maybe if I was a street kid, that would open up some more options for maybe relating to her situation with my own experience. But nah, V just shows up, does the job, and leaves. I was just sitting there like, wow, so much more could have happened with that character. It felt like kind of a missed opportunity to have like a deep, meaningful conversation. I was talking to a friend of mine one night about this game, and they told me how much they loved V for her calm, polite, and sweet voice. And I was like, what? And then I realized that they were playing the Japanese version. And that's when I found out Japanese V is a totally different character. So I quickly opened the PlayStation Store to download the Japanese voice pack and remembered that Cyberpunk is no longer on the PlayStation Store.
デルーズ・オルフィン。そういえばヘイウッドのパン屋のとこにあった侍のグラフィティ覚えてる？
準備はいいか？
やっぱりやめといた方がいい気がする。
今更かよ。
具合は悪化してる。そこまでしてライブがしたい？
じゃあお前が弾け。俺は耳栓でもしてのんびりするよ。
もう分かった。降参よ。楽しんで。
Although we had a pretty rough start, in the end, I loved V as a character. I mean, I guess it makes sense that she's so pissed off all the time, right? Street solo, constantly in danger, and oh yeah, she has a very angry psychopath living in her mind. Which, by the way, Johnny Silverhand is amazing. Wait a minute, I just realized something. Is Johnny Mnemonic actually Johnny Silverhand? Did you know that Keanu Reeves can store up to 80 gigabytes in his head?
I can carry nearly 80 gigs of data in my head.
Did you also know that Cyberpunk 2077 is over 100 gigabytes? Did you know Delamain can carry 80 gigs in his head? So here's the thing about this character. In the original tabletop games rulebook, you can learn about Silverhand and how he pioneered the rocker boy movement in Night City. He wasn't just a rocker rock star but a warrior, an ex-soldier scarred by war and enraged by the Arasaka Corporation for kidnapping his girlfriend and expert netrunner, Alt Cunningham. Johnny's life centers around an eternal hatred for corporations and other corrupt individuals. This is an established character that has a personality and goal. I never thought I'd ever see any actor portraying Silverhand, but gosh darn, Keanu just gets it. I think the internet building Keanu Reeves up as the nicest man on earth was the perfect misdirection when you get his performance as this antisocial, foul-mouthed punk rocker. His first interaction with V is actually really intimidating.
The fuck kind of droid toy are you supposed to be?
Fucking ghost off! See you never, asshole.
Now like that! Stick some iron in your mouth and pull the trigger!
Damn, Johnny, chill out. At first, he's confused, literally waking up from a 50-year slumber on a microchip inside of a box buried deep underground. Now he's saddled with some street punk. He wants V dead, but quickly realizes what's going on and decides to take advantage of what he's been given, a second chance. I love how Johnny goes from, I'm gonna kill you, to, hey punk, let's be friends. And V is understandably upset. I was 100% invested in Johnny's story because I had the context of who the character was and who his friends are in that original story. So the potential of seeing those people again 50 years later was super exciting. Johnny isn't just a ghost living in V's mind, but the second playable character. Throughout the game, you'll be playing a few flashbacks as the legendary rocker boy. The first flashback sees Johnny and his crew planting bombs in Arasaka Tower. By the way, it was right about here when I noticed that Rogue was in this game. Jackie points her out at the end of Act 1, but for some reason I didn't make the connection for who he was talking about until I saw the younger 1980s inspired Rogue in this flashback. Fun fact, when I first read the original 2013 rulebook, Rogue was the first character I saw while I flipped through the hundreds of pages. I always thought she looked so cool, so seeing her remade in full 3D like this was an absolute treat for me personally. Rogue is also the previous owner of the Yaiba Kusanagi, so if she wasn't already mega cool, that just makes her the best. This flashback is so sick. In it, we get to see how Johnny dies, being defeated by the legendary Borg Psycho, Atom Smasher, and having his consciousness uploaded into the supercomputer Mikoshi. The soul killer technology created by Johnny's girlfriend Alt is what transfers Silverhand's consciousness into the biochip that eventually ends up in V's head 50 years later. I just gotta say, the way Johnny's overpowered pistol cuts through these Saka goons while his theme song, The Rebel Path, blasts in the background is so hype and creates quite the breathtaking atmosphere.
I'm sorry.
Speaking of incredible set pieces, there's one mission later on that blew my mind so hard I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing. I keep bringing up that rulebook, right? Well, in that book, there's a story called Never Fade Away, and it's basically a simple story that you can play with pre-made characters, those being Johnny and his crew rescuing Alt from Arasaka Tower. In Cyberpunk 2077, we get a full Never Fade Away retelling, and my god, is it just fucking fantastic. I was playing through this set piece watching all of these events that I had read about years ago play out in an awesome looking AAA video game with fully voice acted characters starring Keanu Reeves. Like, what the fuck? Fighting your way out of Club Atlantis, playing a show loud and proud in front of Arasaka HQ, and failing to reach Alt just before she's locked away in cyberspace was both hype and heartbreaking. Alt looks so amazing in this game too, by the way. Everyone does. Look, there's Kerry Uridine, and he's such a young buck. The whole time I was sitting there thinking, damn, I'm so happy for Mike Pondsmith. He wrote this story over 30 years ago, and here it is, fully recreated in such loving detail. The best part about this is that after this flashback, you can actually reform Johnny's band Samurai, and you get to meet up with Kerry, who's looking pretty good for like an 80-year-old man. The entire band questline is my favorite series of events in this game. I loved every step of this journey, from flunking a date with Rogue to basically giving Carrie another shot at life, letting Johnny speak to him through V. He pretty much apologizes for running off and getting himself killed 50 years prior. You can tell that Rogue and Carrie had never gotten over Johnny's death, what he meant to them all those years ago, and how they've been living for the past 50 years. That's what I love about this story. We get to see how much the characters have changed since 2013. Rogue is the most well-known fixer in the city now, and Carrie sold out big time. He's been living as a famous, gaudy rocker boy ever since Johnny bit the dust. He's kept the rocker boy lifestyle alive, even though the world has moved on from such trivial things. He's still trying to keep Johnny's dream and rocker boy movement going at the expense of his sanity and well-being. I had the biggest smile on my face seeing the ghost of Silverhand come out in V as she and the band rocked out for a small, intimate bar crowd. Getting the band back together and giving these old souls another night to rock out was so heartwarming. Johnny being in the driver's seat taking full control of V, mentioning things that happened in the past that V couldn't possibly know about, was really fun. V and Johnny's relationship starts horribly, with both characters wanting to murder each other. It blossoms into a genuine friendship and trust that perfectly manifests in the rock show with a reformed samurai. Look at me trying to headbang by moving the camera so slowly. I was having a lot of fun, admittedly. Can I just say, I also love how CDPR wrote and recorded like 5 different songs for Samurai to play, like to immerse you in the world better. I just thought it was amazing. At first, the game presents you with the fact that Johnny's construct is slowly overwriting V's identity, even playing mind games on you with V's reflection becoming Johnny's when looking in certain mirrors. Having that fear of being controlled for nefarious means or just losing your identity and body to a very shady voice in your head is horrifying. For most of the early game, you might read Johnny's dialogue and intentions as him maybe wanting to take over V completely. On my first playthrough, as my Corpo Rat character, I saw Johnny in this way. I chose a lot of responses that would go against his beliefs. And this played out horribly for me, by the way. Johnny was very upset with V all the time, and there was a clear rivalry throughout the entire game. There is a point system that goes up if you choose dialogue options that fall in line with Silverhand's personality. And that's basically all that I did on my second playthrough, and it was much better seeing these two get along so well. The dynamic goes from, I don't know if I could trust you, Johnny, to let me make you look like a fucking rock goddess, V. The Samurai show is the perfect payoff to V and Johnny's relationship. I absolutely loved it. Overall, I was hooked on this story. I loved pretty much every part of it. The great writing, fan service, and respect for the source material outshined whatever glitches I had in my playthrough. I wasn't even thinking about that stuff while experiencing the journey. One thing that is very important that you should know about are the character quest lines are 100% essential for the type of ending you get in this game. By the way, all of them are great. They all have full cutscenes with your custom V in them. It was such an amazing surprise seeing my character finally show up in well-shot cutscenes. It really made me feel like I went on a full adventure with my version of V. Starting out with only seeing her reflection in mirrors to getting full-ass cutscenes with her in them. It's just so cool, you know? So yeah, Cyberpunk is definitely a good Cyberpunk game. Like we've established, the main story content doesn't dive as deeply into the story's theme as in some other Cyberpunk media. I also wouldn't say the story left me thinking about the game's theme, because everything is mostly wrapped up in each of the game's endings, even giving you multiple lovely epilogues to close out your specific playthrough. This game is a faithful adaptation of Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk world, which is mostly about fighting against or working with megacorporations, getting teched out, and making a lot of noise. It does all of those things very well. So that's Cyberpunk 2077, a game that I think is great when it isn't totally dumping its guts all over the floor. The gameplay loop and build variety is awesome, but ultimately suffers from some pretty weak enemy design. The open world, when not bugging out, is one of my favorite explorable game worlds. The biggest issue holding this title back is that the game is so obviously unfinished and clearly rushed out to make whatever deadline CDPR's upper management wanted. If rumors are to be believed, the actual dev team wanted more time to work on this thing, and even expressed disappointment present in company meetings post-release. I've been looking forward to this game for a very long time, basically since the title drop trailer that came out before the teaser did. One thing I've learned over the years is that despite the popular beliefs of this game being in development for a full 8 years, that's simply not the case. This game started its development officially in 2016 after Witcher 3's Blood and Wine expansions released. I wish this piece of trivia was more well known, but what are you gonna do? I am as upset as everyone else that the game is barely functional on last-gen consoles. That completely fabricated PS4 gameplay trailer was nothing but a lie, and I think should never go unnoticed. It was literally false advertising. Man, I wish things didn't end up like this. CDPR has put out an apology video recently, and while I think it's really nice that the co-founder of the company is taking the blame over the devs that actually worked on this game under allegedly very stressful conditions, it's time to prove to us that the game is going to be fixed. Regaining the trust of a lot of rightfully upset fans has to be the top priority. But it won't be easy. All of those people who were crunched have to keep working on this game, now under even more extreme conditions with the public breathing down their necks, as well as upper management. It's such a shame because personally I think what's here is really good when it works, but I would be lying if I told you I wasn't also incredibly disappointed with how this game turned out. That makes recommending it really difficult, because even though my second playthrough was totally awesome, that doesn't mean you're gonna get the same experience. The game might be a nightmare for you if you decide to pick it up. That's why I'm going to confidently say that you should wait a few more months if you haven't played the game yet. Let CDPR fix a few more things, and please, I know it's hard, but don't scream at them on Twitter or in your YouTube videos. It only creates a negative atmosphere for the people that still have to work on this game. Just because the game is out doesn't mean everyone gets to go home and have a vacation. They're still there working on the game. Everyone's upset. We all wanted this title to be exactly what was promised back in 2018. No matter what happens, there's no way CDPR is going to leave Cyberpunk in this state. Think of it this way, the content that is available is plentiful, and a lot of the time really, really good. The problems ruining this game will be fixed eventually, and we're going to get even more content too with future DLC. At the end of the day, I mostly feel bad for the people that made this game, and Mike Pondsmith. For years, he looked for the right people to make a true Cyberpunk adaptation, and I think he found them, but under very unfortunate circumstances. It's pretty sad for everyone involved, fans included. How about this? We'll come back to this game a year from now and we'll see what's up. Hopefully all of the bugs and insane glitches will be fixed, but until then, I really hope that Cyberpunk 2077 never fades away. Hey guys, I've been working on this video for like a month. It's been hell, but I do like this game, so it wasn't all that bad. Cyberpunk's controversial development history is an ongoing story. I thought about delaying the video by 1 more week so I could squeeze in new articles that had come out a day before this video was completed. I'll catch those in my next Cyberpunk video if CDPR is successful in cleaning this game up. God, what a crazy ride all of this has been. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and checking out my Patreon link down below. Huge shout out to Itla for helping me with the Cyber Susie art for this video, and another shout out to my pal Razovic for helping me with the badass music video opener on today's vid. Okay guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you all had an amazing holiday and have a happy new year. Later.